Welcome, everyone. I'm David McBride from Course 5 Intelligence. I'm practice lead for our media and telco verticals. I'm excited today for our webinar, and we'll introduce our guests in just a moment. Our topic today is creating satisfied customers by acting on insights. There's no shortage of data in today's business landscape. All of this data should lead to more insights and more decisions. It's still hard to act on those decisions. The execution piece is no small task. And that's why this theme really interested me when our guest and I started to collaborate on it and think about what we might present. So today we're going to talk about how Cox Communications takes action based on all of its data. One of its most successful, Cox is one of the most successful cable and telco companies in the world. It focuses on customer behavior and making prioritization decisions across all stages of the customer journey. And we're going to talk today about how that happens, how data from cross-channel interactions can bring together decision makers and bring them closer to action, how customer behavior can drive prioritization decisions that result in taking action. We're going to talk about enterprise-wide feature delivery, how data and action must reflect the fact that customers interact across the enterprise. We'll talk about the need to act on data signals driven by end-to-end customer experience data and leveraging customer behavior data to delight them and win their loyalty. We want to invite you to please be sure to ask your questions through Zoom's Q&A function or chat functionality, and we'll respond to those questions toward the end of our time together today. Course 5 is a digital transformation company. We enable digital transformation for some of the world's largest and most successful brands through analytics, insights, and artificial intelligence. There's about 1,200 of us worldwide, and we are focused on customer centricity, innovation, and empowerment. We're fortunate to have been recognized by a number of the world's leading analyst organizations and journalists. So we're quite proud of that as well. So that's Course 5. A few housekeeping items today as we get started. We're going to be recording the session, and so we invite you to look in your inbox after the fact for a link to the recording. You can also find it at our website, course5i.com. Please continue the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag actioning data to smarter insights. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be having an opportunity for Q&A, so we encourage you to share your questions in the chat window, and we'll get to them toward the end of our discussion with my guest. So let me introduce my guest today. Darsh Patel is Director of Product Management at Cox Communications, overseeing the Cox and Cox business apps. He's come into his product leadership role via the user experience design route. So you know that he's going to have some opinions about how customers experience a product, a service, or a brand. Darsh is passionate about building experiences that look to meet both business needs and customer expectations. He's skilled at driving digital roadmaps by leveraging his experience in product management, UX, self-service, mobile first, and agile methodologies. Welcome, Darsh. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, David. I'm excited to be here because when we had talked about what the ideas for the webinar, it dovetailed exactly what my day-to-day is. So I'm glad it's interesting to other people. Happy to
Excellent.
share.
Well, we've got a true expert. Let's talk about it. Foundationally, I'd love to hear more, and for our guests to hear more about your background. How did you choose UX as you got started in digital and in business?
Yeah, so I graduated from Georgia Tech, and I didn't go the traditional route of just doing computer science, but also wanted to do digital media because I was interested in that human-computer interaction. Back in the day, UX wasn't really a focus of a lot of industries. But it was sort of leaning in that direction. Is like, how do you take code and make it user-friendly? And so that's what has always interested me, even to this day. And so after I graduated Georgia Tech, I focused a lot on these digital experiences. So my entire career has been about improving digital experiences from American Express, Healthcare Home Base, and then at Cox. That's how I got really into focusing on the customers.
That's a great foundation. I mean, anytime you orient yourself around the customer, that seems like a recipe for success.
I've enjoyed it, Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've enjoyed all throughout my experience, even, and we'll get into this later, transitioning from UX to product, that focus on the customer has always been there for me.
That was actually my next question. So how did that transition play out?
Yeah, so I got really lucky at Cox, and so if you asked me when I joined Cox, would would I ever be interested in product management? I would have told you not a chance, because I just didn't know what that discipline was about. But I got the opportunity to shadow a lot of strong product managers on our side, and I learned throughout that process that if you want to drive true change, it sort of starts with product. Essentially, they define the roadmap, et cetera, and then user experience is sort of baked into that. And so what I wanted to do is be at the forefront of, turning those opportunities and realizing that for customers.
Cool. Did you have an early aha moment related to customer data or customer experiences that you'd like to share?
I did. It was funny because this is sort of what nudged me in the product space. So when I was a UX architect here at Cox, I was in the user experience team, and what we were doing is a redesign of the entire billing application. And so what I did just naturally is take click data, take analytics, and sort of plot that out on what the current state is, identify those friction points, and sort of use that to guide the design. The aha moment came in as soon as we went through user research testing, comparing the current state versus the prototype. I saw CSAT scores increase. I saw NPS increase. When we launched it, you saw an increase in efficiency, so customers not dropping out of the flow, et cetera. And I saw that the wide lens of how you turn data into insights and action. I was hooked. That was the
Isn't that
moment.
amazing? It's so energizing when you see that something you did has an impact.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. So what excites you now about taking action with data?
It is that. So I'm also lucky, like I count my stars. We work on applications for Cox. And so what that does is, trying to meet business need and drive, improved customer experience. So the Cox brand is all about frictionless, predictable, proactive. How do we humanize these experiences? So that really touches on my UX background. But layering product is also about, okay, how do we move the needle? How do we drive sales? How do we drive engagement? And so every day is a new challenge for me, and that just keeps me excited.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah.
That's great. So let's talk about this acting on insight topic a bit more. On the topic of creating satisfied customers by acting on insights, what are some of the obstacles? What makes it hard? Why doesn't everybody do this from the get-go?
I mean, that's a great question. I think no one's solved it. I think it's a constant challenge, but it's something to think about. What we fall into often is, siloed conversations. And so everybody has data. It's how, what we measure, how we interpret that data, and also how do we come together on aligning on a true business objective. And I think that's where businesses face a lot of challenges. It's like, yes, we have data analysts, but how do we as a business align on an approach to solving some of these friction points?
Interesting. Yeah. So it can sometimes feel like solving the friction point is so hard. Just bringing people together is sort of a focusing function. Any suggestions for how you just get people in the room together?
Yeah, and we'll touch on this a little later with my use cases, but essentially it is just aligning on a high level business objective that resonates across the business. And so it's less about how can we make the app better, but more about how do we build better solutions for our customers. And I think everybody in the business should align on that. It's like, yes, we want to make experiences that are easier for our customer. We want to make sure that we drop operational savings. We want to make sure that we work well together. And so I think just identifying those key drivers for why you're trying to do something, and then using data to sort of help bolster that conversation.
Right. Any suggestions on how people can navigate scenarios where there's competing priorities across an organization? I mean, sometimes there's so many different opportunities, and it's hard to get cooperation sometimes when you're not necessarily aligned.
And we're facing the same challenges. Like, what do we work on for the next 12 months? But essentially, it is that just capturing all of the business objectives across the board, and then identifying those biggest bang for the buck, because there's always going to be things that bubble up to the top, and it's making sure that everybody's aligned on that, and then going after that, because you're right, there's competing priorities. Care has different priorities in marketing, then has different priorities in product, but if we all agree on a general direction, I think that it works out in the end.
Yeah, the idea of getting together and then having a list, looking at
Mhm.
the ROI of opportunities, which is inherently a data-oriented exercise. I mean, you
That's
can
right.
have discussions around how you've arrived at an ROI decision, but I think often companies are making decisions without even getting there. And it
Right.
can take a lot of time and effort to calculate an ROI on a particular initiative. But man, I think that those are really powerful conversations once you start having them.
Yeah, and I know that this may be cliche, but we sort of boil it back down to what the data tells us, because we do want passionate voices in the room, but essentially at the end of the day is, can you quantify? Can we measure? Can we drive based on the things that they're tracking? Just so you can have that objective view about how are we moving the needle with this.
So sometimes it feels like you, when you're dealing with lots of data from lots of sources, that there's so much effort that goes into just collecting the data and representing it on a dashboard. That you hand that dashboard over at the end of the day, and as an analyst, you feel like, whew, I'm done. But really, that's kind of the beginning of things if it relates to acting on data, right? There's so much more to it. So any suggestions or thoughts on how data-minded people can move beyond the dashboard phase and create urgency around taking action?
Absolutely, yeah, and because we've worked with your team for years now, we've sort of just baked in the analyst into product. Like, we've just inherited that skill set, and vice versa, because we want to make sure that from an analyst approach, the insights are making their way into roadmaps and into deliverables, and then conversely, we want to make sure that as product management, we're making appropriate decisions based on that data, and so making that a two-way conversation versus, like we talked about before, just siloed conversations where you throw something over the wall and hoping that whoever catches it takes off and runs with it. It's how do we collaborate and drive opportunities?
Yeah. Any thoughts on how do you put customer experience right at the center? Making that your North Star. Is there any tips and tricks there to ensuring that you actually follow through on that ambition?
Yeah, I think engagement data is something that we highly prioritize, because there's, like we've talked about before, there's tons of data in terms of, you can measure almost anything. But at the end of the day, if what we're trying to do is to make meaningful, efficiencies based on customer data. So are we making a flow easier? Are we eliminating friction points? And sort of that has to be the focus area, because we found out from an app standpoint, you take that and customers will sort of reward that based on higher engagement. And sort of they're helping you win if you focus on them, because you're eliminating friction. They're more likely to come in and shop and pay their bills and chat to an agent, whatever you have you. Just make it easy for them.
Right. There are what comes to mind for me now in this, as you say that, is there are a lot of really interesting frameworks that kind of help you keep focused on what really matters, and kind of find your way through improving customer experiences. One that comes to mind for me often is the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, and act framework. And the key part of that, I think, or one of the key parts, is the loop component, the fact that you're taking information from the output and feeding it back into kind of the beginning. And that, I like that, because it implies there's an ongoing, I guess, testing mentality. And maybe it's an A/B test, or maybe it's just we're always getting better kind of test. But any thoughts on iteration or experimentation that kind of helps you keep moving forward here?
Yeah, and there are two ways. So when we talk about planning our certain features, we embrace the agile methodology, defining MVP. But what that helps us do is also plan for the future. Is that, yes, we've built a version of the thing that we want to put out there, but what does phase 2 look like? What does phase 3 look like? And one should help feed the other, is measuring what MVP is, identifying those friction points, et cetera, like we talked about, and then using that to navigate prioritization. What does phase 2 look like? And then at the end of the day, like after you've launched something, we have this mantra of your work's never done. Just because you've released something doesn't mean that that's the end of it. Essentially, it's the start of the next cycle, is that measure approach. And then how do you feed those insights back into your prioritization?
Great. Yeah, I love it. That consistent approach, the fact that your work is never done, that really resonates with me. On these topics, I love the framework, the ideas, the theory that you're sharing here. Would love to share with our audience some of the success stories that you've encountered, that you've experienced. One that we talked about before was related to your modem reboot work.
Yeah.
We were preparing for this. You mentioned that. Great insights overall on taking action, but then these experiences around taking. Let's just get into the modem reboot side of things. You tell us about that, and I think you might have some slides to share there.
I do, yeah. Just to tee it up, the two use cases that I'll walk you through are based on how customers sort of troubleshoot and get informed about service-related issues. Because we're essentially a utility company, we only get really contacted when there are issues, right? So there's network connectivity issues, or there's an outage in my area. And so these two use cases are about how do we identify friction points, how do we take action on them, and how do we deliver experiences that build on those insights. And I'll share the reboot, and then we can talk about any lessons learned there.
Right.
So building a better reboot, just a quick background. The Cox app was completely redesigned in 2019. And what we wanted to do is focus on a native experience. So Cox's brand principles about frictionless, proactive, predictable. It's all about how do we make things easier for the customer. And from an app team perspective, we said that means that we build it native. And so what we did was define an MVP that we could deliver in a year, which is a short amount of time to do an app rebuild, I'll tell you that. But what helped us is making sure that we could leverage Cox.com functionality for things that we did not build native. And so prioritize things that we wanted to build native, but then things that we didn't, we would just link out to them. You'll see that why that was a bit of a challenge. So what we did after we launched the MVP is we monitored how the app was performing, but we also had that wide lens of customers don't just interact with us from a single channel. They go to the app, they go to the web, they go to the IVR, they call in. And so how do we take the data that we have out there and say, okay, how does the app perform better? So whenever we're building the reboot experience, how do we build a better reboot? So we looked at, partner heavily with care. And, this is where the collaboration comes in. We're not the experts. We brought in the experts from process and care and field. And we took a look at how the modems are performing, what's going on with an agent when customers are chatting or calling, the average handle time, and also customer feedback. Go to the app rating store, go to the emails. What is the common complaint? And so what we saw was that it was inconsistent. So the reboot that was built on the web, the reboot that was built in the IVR, the things that the agents were able to do, it's out of whack. So it was solving a need, but it wasn't a true North Star where we're trying to go with this experience. And so it was also unintuitive. And so if I tried to do it on the web and then I called in to do it, it may not be the same flow for the customer. Even though it was the same customer, same gateway, same issue, it could have been treated very differently. And it was also a fire and forget. And so what the web was doing was just putting the reset out there and sort of hoping that it all worked out in the end. That's sort of, it was, again, like I was saying, it was checking a box. It was working up to a certain point, but it wasn't truly what we were after. And so the insight there is very obvious, right? Customers need a simple and consistent reboot experience across all their channels. So that was the insight based on the data.
It's kind of your North Star, right? Like thinking about what the customer needs and have it be consistent across all the channels.
That's right, exactly. So again, we weren't just trying to solve for the app, we were trying to solve for Cox as a whole. It's like when we're building a better reboot, that means everybody succeeds.
But the work you were doing was specifically in the app, at least initially. Is that right?
That's right, exactly. Yep. And so we were focusing, like when we turned the insight into delivery, that's where we focused on just the app. So we identified the North Star vision for all of the channels.
Yeah.
And then we said, okay, for the app, what does that look like? And so we took that root, that nugget of consistent rebooting. We built an omni-channel solution as Cox to make sure that when we built it natively in the app, it took account all of those other interactions that were happening across all channels and capturing that. So if you started a reboot on the web and then switched to the app, we were cognizant of the fact that your modem was still rebooting. And so in order to build a better reboot in the app, we had to consider all of these other use cases.
Okay. Sounds challenging.
It was, yeah. So it would have been very easy for us to do, and that's where, we were trying to challenge the status quo. It would have been very straightforward for us to implement a native reboot experience that was current state. But what we wanted to do is invest the time and say, okay, truly, how do we accomplish what customers are looking for, and building that true omni-channel solution.
Nice.
Yeah, and so after we did that, everybody loves a hockey stick growth. And so that's what we ended up seeing is as soon as we made it live, customers really resonated with it. We had a real-time reboot. So you could see when your modem was rebooting, we could see when you're back online, the app would inform you. And it really was just a pleasant experience in the app. And you could see it, customers were resonating with it. And not only that, it brought in, this is where it ties back to business objective. Are we moving the needle? Well, yes, 75% of the customers that did their modem reboot never contacted us. And the people that did contact us, because it was built in the case framework, the agent was able to skip past the fact that you had already rebooted and then went on to the secondary troubleshooting. So that cut down average handle time quite significantly.
Wow. So customers, I think, coming away from that must have been satisfied with these improvements overall. Did it? You don't have it on the screen here, but have you been able to measure any CSAT improvements?
We did, yeah. So the app has consistently been. I think we launched at 4.4, and then when we did some of these improvements, we bumped up to what is now 4.6 stars in the iOS app rating. And what's funny is, like, when we're talking to our care folks, customers will always, leave you a bad review because of something that happened in the app. But as soon as we launched modem reboot, they actually did praise the fact that we listened to them and we took action on that. And that's something that we didn't account for, but it was, sort of a nod that we were doing the right thing.
Moving in the right direction. That's fantastic. Yeah. Anything that surprised you about some of these results?
I think the immediate adoption, like, we weren't expecting a hockey stick growth, quite honestly. Yeah. Like, you can see 2 months after we made it live, we're more than double the engagement. I don't think we would have even planned for that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. About lessons learned, whether they be process or about the customer or about technology, any lessons learned stand out for you?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about focusing on the customer, it is all of that pre-plan. So it's easy to go in with it's easy to take an insight and try to jump towards the result. But what we ended up figuring out is it is worth investing that time to align on processes, seeing where even the back-end processes may need to streamline themselves before you even take it on. So highlighting those dependencies even before you work on it, I think that was very critical to us.
Nice. So then presumably you're able to take that forward into other work. I don't know if sequentially this next one falls after that, but service alerts was the other one that you were planning to share with us.
That's right.
The background, the lay of the land for that use case.
Absolutely, yeah. So again, omnichannel is going to be a theme that you'll hear consistently across our thing, and that's what we want to try and solve for the app. We want to acknowledge the fact that it's sort of a build once, use everywhere, start anywhere, finish anywhere type of approach. We're not focused just on an app experience, even though that's what we control. We want to acknowledge that digital extends to the web, You may call in, et cetera. So we want to make it easy across the board. And so service alerts is similar, but it's related but different. So lack of connectivity, like we had talked about, is the number one reason that customers contact us. And root causes can vary widely. And so what we wanted to do is, again, build a better service alert experience, because each channel was using a one size fits all approach. Basically, either the customer was in an outage or they weren't. And that's essentially the level of what we were trying to message the customers. And it was static. So we would just let you know, David, you're in an outage. It's going to be resolved at some point. We knew that that was, again, solving a need, but it wasn't best in class. It wasn't the omni-channel experience. It wasn't our North Star. And so we did the same level of analysis. It's like customers contacted us in various channels to get informed about service alerting. We also looked at, Cox is very good about monitoring node health constantly. And same things about why are customers contacting us, event tracking about did they hop from one channel to another, trying to get more accurate information or more updated information based on the channel. And then again, feedback. We always tie customer feedback into what we're working on. Similar findings, inconsistent approach. This one size fits all does not work, because again, like I talked about, the root cause could be a variety of things. It could be a hurricane, it could be a fiber cut, it could be whatever. What we were trying to solve for in the short term wasn't really meeting the need, because we weren't, again, on the brand principles, we weren't acknowledging to the customer their specific issue. We're sort of generalizing the fact that you're in an outage. And so, again, insight. I'm hoping these insights are very obvious. Is customers expect timely and accurate service alerting? Like, of course they do.
Right.
Turning that into delivery was that was the challenge.
Yeah. So yeah, talk to us about that. That's kind of the crux of it all, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, omni-channel, we wanted to make sure that it was a consistent message across. So whether you called in, went to the app or the web, we gave you the same information, same estimated time of resolution, allowed you to sign up for SMS alerts. And it's always monitoring. And so what current state is based on call dispositions, we would manually go in and update a ticket on your node account, whatever. But we know that, we were trying to take advantage of what Cox was doing anyway, which is network monitoring. And so there's a team just dedicated to seeing what the health of the nodes are, and also using that information tied with call information and building a better service alerting, so we can be real time, we can be dynamic, and you'll see later also varied. So based on whether it was just network congestion or there was a fiber cut, sort of message you differently, because you're experiencing a different type of service impact. So it was both proactive and reactive and variable. And then from a delivery standpoint, this is another thing that we uncovered, is that starting with the agents is a great approach, because this case-based view, build once and use across all channels, just put it in the hands of the agents, and they will be able to fold in customer sentiment without having already baked it into an experience. So they will let us know that, hey, customers were contacting us about these things. These are ideas on how we could improve the case, even before app touched it.
It seems like one of the takeaways there might be, and maybe you've already stated this, but the idea that when you're trying to take action, that it's important to involve people who are kind of closest to either the customer or to the data. Like make sure that you're not withholding the opportunity for them to provide input until late in the stage. Involve them early.
That's right. Yeah, and so from an app standpoint, our goal is to make sure that you never contact an agent. But the other side of the coin is, if we fail, then the agent becomes they're the crux of the customer experience at that point. Right. And so what we wanted to do is just go talk to the agents, go talk to field, go talk to the call and chat agents, and say, what are customers complaining about? Can we, as the app, do better? Can we surface things earlier in the process? Can we show them active, dynamic messaging that can help reduce the contact?
Nice. I mean, when you just say it now, it seems so obvious and so easy. I'm sure it wasn't.
Right.
Any cultural barriers or challenges that you encountered in that process?
It wasn't. So I think as a company, we were, again, it's all about identifying that true North Star. And, like we had talked about, there's so many siloed conversations and priorities and objectives that sometimes it's hard to rally around a single concept. But when we go back into the insight, delivering timely and accurate service alerting information to our customers, that's something that everybody is interested in, from
Sure.
marketing to sales to product to care. We all want that for our customers. And so we just use that as an impetus to get investment into the app to build this approach. Same thing for the web, same thing for the IVR, and the same thing for the agent tools.
And for whatever else you have on the roadmap for the next 12 months, sounds like that framework is something that you'll be able to rely on and accelerate.
Yeah, that's right. And so, when it comes to installation enhancements or managing your profile or, two-factor authentication, these things that we know are on the app roadmap, but we need to solve across channels. We're sort of using the same mindset is what is our North Star? Identify that, prioritize that based on the data, rally around a single objective, and then sort of build once and use everywhere type of approach.
Sounds like a great framework. North Star, prioritize based on the data, build once, use everywhere.
Yeah.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Anything final to wrap up on this?
Yeah, so for this one, measuring the impact, the mantra about you're never done. So we launched that, wonderful alerting experience. And then we were able to see, so when Hurricane Ida hit, we saw that customers were coming in droves to the app, and we were able to send customers to the app because we knew that it was the easiest, most accurate and dynamic way of customers tracking their outages, because they were able to use their cell network when their home modem was down, for example. And so we saw a 2x improvement in app usage during outages. When I talked about the dynamic messaging, so we shifted from a one-size-fits-all to 8, and we're able to scale that to 20 in the future, different type of service alert types. And then at the end is reduce contact when alert is present. We're actually able to track as soon as we show the message, the alert message in the app, contact rate drops immediately. And so customers just want to be informed. They just want to know that Cox is aware of the issue and they're okay with it. We give them a time of resolution. They'll check back when it's done.
Nice. I had an outage at my house. I'm not a Cox customer, but we had like a 12-hour outage last Friday. And I can tell you, just knowing what the situation is helped me make other plans. Like I had so I went to my parents' house and used their Wi-Fi and their connectivity. So it's super helpful to know that. And I will say that company probably has some things to learn from you guys. So maybe they're watching today because it wasn't as elegant as what you're describing.
I appreciate that. Thanks all.